Well, good evening once again. As Pastor said, we are at our final journey of this Lenten season with our sixth interview tonight. And we started out with Nicodemus and then John, and we kind of worked our way through various different men, and even Mary. We had Mary and the boy with the loaves that we called Blake for the night. And of course, Lazarus. And tonight, we have the pleasure of Peter. So, Peter, welcome back to the future. Please come forward.
Slower than I used to be.
Well, time catches up with us all.
That's right.
It's only been a few years.
Thank you.
You betcha. Well, I trust you had good travels.
Definitely.
And,
Flight from Tel Aviv went very smoothly.
well, good. I know those birds that fly that you jumped on are kind of unusual for your time, but
This kind of fast forward, I'm in a time warp.
welcome back to the future. Anyway, why don't we start tonight with the interview and tell us a little bit about your life before you got Jesus.
Our family was all from Bethsaida. We were all fishermen and born and raised there in Bethsaida. My father, Jonah, and my mother, and my little brother, Andrew, all born and raised there. And Bethsaida is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. And it's contrary to most of the cities that you find in Galilee, it's on the east side of the river. And a lot of that is just because there was fishermen, and that's where they would like to put in their boats from there. But yeah, been there all my life. So,
Wow. Well, so how did you meet Jesus?
that's an interesting story. My brother Andrew and I were both followers of John the Baptist, and quite often went to listen to him speak. And he drew a crowd that was really big. And one day, though, he went with John. I'm talking about us. Some friends of ours also lived in Bethsaida, James and John. And James and John were also fishermen. But anyway, John and Andrew went to see John the Baptist. And John the Baptist was going through his normal routine and talking to all the people. And anyway, all of a sudden, out of character, he pointed off in the distance. He said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." And it kind of shocked us all, and we weren't expecting that, and we'd never heard that before. But he pointed at Jesus. And from that, Andrew and John knew that was the Messiah. So Andrew came and got me right away. And he took me in. He said, came running up and he said, "We found the Messiah." Okay, and he had to introduce me. So he took me over to see Jesus. And Jesus, I'd never met Jesus. He didn't know anything about me. I mean, Andrew hadn't spilled the beans and told him my life story or anything.
But he did know about you.
The what?
He did know about you.
Yeah, he knew everything. I mean, he walked up to me and he knew my name. He said right off the top, "Now, there's a little difference here, You introduced me as Peter, but that wasn't my given name. My given name was Simon." And he walked up to me and he said, "Simon, son of Jonah." He knew my dad's name. He knew where we were from. He knew we were fishermen, and I could also tell that he knew a lot more than that. His look at me just kind of pierced my soul. And it was like he knew everything about me without me even telling him. And at that point, he did something else too. He changed my name. He said, "From now on, rather than Simon, you'll be called Cephas. You thought I was going to say Peter, didn't you? No, but Cephas is actually the Aramaic word, and it means Peter, or it's translated Peter in other languages, and it means rock. And at that point in time, I didn't know what he was doing. I didn't know why he was calling me a rock. And that came later. The longer I stayed with him, it became more evident why he was calling me a rock. More about that later on. So,
Well, and you know, as you think about that, though, you know, for him to come and call you by name, I mean, he knows each and every one of us.
oh, yeah.
And that was a perfect example of that. That was awesome.
That was the beginning of my understanding about how great his power was.
Well, and he performed many miracles, or back in your time, signs, as it was called. But what is the most memorable miracle that occurred?
Well, last week, I believe it was, you interviewed a young man who had been there to witness and be a part of one of his greatest miracles. And it was when he fed a crowd of 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish, you know, and that crowd, let me kind of back up and mention why that crowd came together. Jesus had been speaking over all the countryside, and he was starting to draw a great crowd, just like John the Baptist. But there was one difference. He was also healing people. And so people would bring their ailing friends and relatives to him and then heal him. And it wasn't just 5,000 people. That day, there were 5,000 men is what they estimate. But I would say, counting the women and children, there was probably between 15 and 20,000 people there. And he talked all day with them, he healed all day, and it came evening. And these people, we were in a remote place along the Sea of Galilee. And these people were getting hungry. They hadn't had anything to eat. There wasn't anything close. There wasn't any towns nearby. And so he asked my brother Andrew, you know, how are we going to feed these people? And Andrew knew about this young lad that had the 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, you know, this young man has 5 loaves and 2 fish. And that's all we can seem to come up with. Well, Jesus said, that's fine. And he took the 5 loaves and 2 fish and blessed them and began to distribute them to those people and distribute. And I don't know what was happening, but everybody by the end of that night was full. And not only that, he had the people that were following him, myself included, go around and gather up all the bread that was left. And there was 12 baskets full of it. Just absolutely amazing. And once again, you know, the strength of his power, you know, just was amazing there. But that wasn't the end of the story that night for me. You know, the crowds were still hanging around him and he needed to get away. And so he went up on a mountain, and he had a very innate ability to disappear too, to get off by himself. And he did. He went up on the mountain, left the disciples with the crowd, and finally the crowd dissipated, and the disciples decided, we're going to take a boat across the way and get back to home territory. And so they headed out, or we headed out. We were all in the same boat. And we get out on the lake, and it was smooth going at first, and later at night it got rougher and rougher. And then something weird happened. Off in the distance, we see someone walking on the lake out there. It was really strange. At first, we thought it was a ghost, and we kept getting closer, even though we were a whole lot scared. And it turned out that ghost was Jesus. And of course, being my impetuous self, I said, Jesus, if that's you, tell me to come out there to you, okay? I wanted to see what it was like to walk on water. And he did. He said, come on. And so I started walking out there on the waves and watching Jesus, and everything was going great, and it was an unbelievable feeling, you you know, kind of like flying in from Tel Aviv, except you were on top of the water, you know, but then the waves got a little rougher. And I lost my concentration or my focus on Jesus, and I started to sink. And I said, save me, Jesus. You know, save me. I'm going down. And he did. He reached out his hand and pulled me up, and we walked on to the shore. And that was, you know, another case in point about his power. A lot of the miracles that seemed impressive to me were things that would impress a fisherman. You know, you took 2 fish and 5 loaves and multiplied them into a whole bunch. He controlled the wind and waves on the sea. You know, as a fisherman, I had encountered that many times being out in the middle of a storm, but there wasn't anybody there that said, be still. And Jesus could do that. So those were 2 of the most impressive. There was another time it involved a fish, and we were needing tax money. Every year we were required to pay a tax at the temple. And he said, go catch a fish and look at its mouth. I kind of looked at him funny and, what are you talking about? So I caught a fish and looked at its mouth. And there was a shekel, which was enough to pay the temple tax. And I took care of that. So that was another strange thing that happened. Another miracle that I remember really well was something that happened inside my family, I guess you'd say. I'm married, have a mother-in-law. A lot of people badmouth their mothers-in-law, and not me. I had an absolutely wonderful mother-in-law, but she became sick. You know, she lived across the river in Capernaum, and Jesus was in that town that day. And so Jesus came and healed her. She had a bad fever. She couldn't get out of bed, and, you know, was just totally incapacitated. He came and told her to get up, and she got up, and she was feeling so good. She made a meal for us, served us, and, you know, just happy as a lark. So that is indelibly impressed on me because it was close family too.
Very close family.
Oh, yeah. Very, and there's so many other miracles I could talk about, but those were kind of personal to me.
Well, you know, as we're talking about miracles, but they're coming about, I guess, the most remarkable thing that you can remember before Jesus died and came back to life.
You know, that's the before Jesus died is an important part because his death and resurrection, of course, that's so impressive, it's hard to believe. But there was one time before that, and Jesus took 3 of us up on a mountain, and it was James and John and I. And James and John were the sons of Zebedee, and something I forgot to mention earlier. But those 2 guys.
Oh, I know where you're going with this. The Sons of Thunder?
No, Sons of Thunder, absolutely. Those 2 guys had the nickname, the Sons of Thunder. And I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what fishermen were like in that day, and probably in your present day. You know, the Sons of Thunder was a nickname they got probably because of the way they acted, the way they spoke. Fishermen of that day were boisterous and pushy, and, you know, they didn't have a boss and vulgar at times. You know, I mean, they were, a lot of people considered them to be low life. And I would say James and John were as boisterous and vulgar as any of the rest of us. And, you know, they were there. But anyway, back to the
Well, they were fishermen, but they sometimes talk like sailors, I guess.
Oh, yeah, they were very much so. Yeah. You talk about the blue tint to the atmosphere. Yeah, they could raise that real easily. So, but that let's see, going back to talking about what happened there, James and John, the 2 sons of Zebedee, Jesus asked them and me to go with him. So we went up on a mountain, and we get to the top. And well, actually, as we were going up, his face and his clothing started shining just unbelievably. And, that was amazing enough. And we get to the top of the mountain, and all of a sudden, Moses and Elijah appear out of nowhere. And how did we know it was Moses and Elijah? I mean, they had died many, many years before we were ever born. Actually, let me correct that. Moses died. Elijah didn't die. He was taken up into heaven. But they were gone from this earth many, many years before we were born. But somehow we knew who they were. And Jesus and Moses, the lawgiver, and Elijah, a prophet, they were all there together chatting. And I was so flabbergasted I didn't know what to say. Of course, you see something like that, it just takes your voice away. But I finally blubbered out, Jesus, would you like us to make 3 tents for you? I didn't have a clue what I was saying, but I thought, do something, don't just stand here. And before Jesus had a chance to even answer my question, a cloud came down on those 3. And there was this voice from heaven out of nowhere, a big booming voice. This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And the cloud withdrew, and there stood Jesus all by himself. And if any of the 3 of us had any doubts as to who Jesus was before then, we didn't now. Jesus was the Son of God, okay? And we were supposed to listen to what he was telling us, and that came straight from God. Yeah, Jesus also said something else right then as we were leaving. He said, don't tell anybody this until after I've died and come back to life. I don't want anybody to know this, but the 3 of us had that secret from that time until the time we came back from death.
I was going to say, I thought when we had talked before, you said something about the secret that was not to be divulged. So, and you all kept that secret as well.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Scared not to.
So in all of this, so have you ever felt like you let Jesus down?
Oh, yeah. Other than Jesus' death on the cross, this was the worst day of my life. And it was actually at his trial. And John was there at the trial. He got into the trial somehow easier than I did. But prior to the trial, Jesus said his disciples come with him and to the Mount of Olives, the garden. And he wanted us to be there when he was praying or to pray with him. And we all kept falling asleep on him. And that was bad enough. He kept waking us up. And I don't know, no one could seem to stay awake. And then, I don't know if that prompted it or what, but he made a broad statement to all of us. He said, all of you will betray me before this is done. Every one of you. And I just couldn't tolerate him saying that. I wasn't going to betray him. Or I didn't think I was going to. And I said, Jesus, I'll never betray you. And the thought there kind of overwhelms me. Came back and he said, before the rooster crows, you will have betrayed me 3 times. And so we made our way to the trial. And like I said, John knew the high priest pretty well, and he got in, nobody questioned him. I got there and tried to sneak in. I wanted to be there at the trial. Actually, there was one thing that occurred before then. When they came to arrest him, I was still in that mode where I was going to protect Jesus from anyone. And Jesus had told us to bring a sword with us that night for some reason. He had never done that before. And they came to arrest him, and and one of the people that was there was one of the servants of the high priest. And, you know, I didn't want Jesus arrested. And so I took that sword and cut off the ear of that servant. And Jesus said, no, put it away. Another miracle, he put the ear of the guy back on, you know, and he was fine. Otherwise, they probably would have arrested me too. Now, back to the trial. I kind of left that out. That was an important piece because, you know, my intentions were to do that, to protect Jesus and never betray him. But I got there, started getting in, had to get in to get close to the fire. It was cold that night. And there was a servant girl came up to me. She was real pesky and started saying, you were one of them. You were with him. I said, no, I wasn't with him. So I denied I was with Jesus. And by then, some of the rest of the crowd had heard the same thing, and they started, and she kept after me. You were with him, weren't you? You're from Galilee. I can tell by your accent. You were with him. No, I was never with him. And more of the crowd heard what she was asking her, I should say, accusing me of, and they all came back. Yeah, you were one of his followers. And I vehemently denied it. I actually cursed when they came back and told me. And then the rooster crowed. And Jesus looked at me, and I knew what he was talking about. I had denied him 3 times in public. You know, I had done exactly what he said I was going to do. I betrayed him. And I went outside and cried my eyes out. I felt that I was the lowest of the low at that point.
So, based on that though, did Jesus forgive you?
That's the really positive part of this. And before I get to that, let me throw in my last fish story for the night because it leads into that. There, after Jesus had died and rose again, the disciples were kind of on their own, you know, at that point. And there were 7 of us that decided to go fishing that night. And we were all out in a boat, fished all night, didn't catch a single fish. Taxes wouldn't have been too good that night. But anyway, we started to come in. We see a guy standing on the shore, and he yells out to us, how'd y'all do? So didn't catch a single thing. And kept getting closer, and we could see it was Jesus. He said, throw your net out on the right side of the boat. And we thought, what do we got to lose? Might as well. So we threw the net out on the right side of the boat, and amazing number of fish in that one cast. Matter of fact, later on, we counted there were 153 fish in a net full. It didn't break the net, but it was so full of fish, we had to have all of us to help pull it in. And we get to the shore, and Jesus had actually prepared a meal for us, a breakfast. You know, we were at that point already. We'd fished all night. But the number of fish that we had caught was just absolutely astounding. And when we got close enough to shore that I could see it was Jesus, I jumped in. I wanted to get there first, wanted to talk to him and say hi, and see how everything was. Well, we ate, and we were there with him. And after we ate breakfast with him, Jesus told me to come with him. And he took me by himself, kind of in the quiet. He said, Peter, do you love me? And I said back to him, Lord, you know I love you. And he said, feed my lambs. And then he asked me again, he said, Peter, do you love me? And I was really adamant about it. Lord, you know I love you. He said, feed my sheep. And then the third time, he said, Peter, do you love me? And I said, Lord, you know I always love you. He said, feed my sheep. And then it dawned on me. He was asking me one time for every time I denied him, you know, and he was also forgiving me for what I had done. And then he said what he had said to me at the very beginning of everything. He said, follow me. You know, and we did. And it was at that point, you know, we knew absolutely, or I knew absolutely, that Jesus loved me, okay? And that he was all powerful, he was all knowing, and that we were to follow him. And from that point on in my life, I would be a fisher of men.
Wow, well put.
Yes.
Fisher of men. So, we thank you for sharing your story. I don't know if there's anything left that you might want to share, because you really told it all to us. You shared your whole story. Yeah.
There's lots of other details, lots of other miracles that we could talk about it, we could sit here all night, but those are the ones that I remember most vividly. And also the effect that he had on me, not only me, but the ones that was so evident were my brother Andrew and James and John. You know, when he said, follow me, we dropped everything, you know, and from that point on, we were his disciples, no longer fishermen. Yeah. I know James and John, they turned it over to their dad.
Yeah.
And just, here's the boats, here's the nets, and that was it. So, but yeah, living my life with him through those years, those 3 years of his ministry was just an absolutely amazing experience, something that you never ever want to turn down. So, thank you for letting me be here with you.
We cannot thank you enough for making the trip and sharing your story. So may God bless your travels.
Thank you. See if I can extract myself.